Culture Without Books. Are we losing our culture of physical books to ebooks? Everybody has an opinion about this, I think. I've never met anyone yet who doesn't. I think my opinion is pretty clear. I have these with me. This is not everything that I have. So I use them for not just reading books, but also reading manuscripts that come in. And it is the biggest lifesaver in the world. I was a military wife for 20 years also. And I know we all tend to accumulate books a little bit. And when you have to move every 3 years, it's not a whole lot of fun. So I got into the habit of using ebooks at least 15 years ago. There's two downsides, just like the road to everything, and I'm sure that our panelists will tell us. But let's go ahead and have introductions starting from the end, all the way over here.
Over to me?
Over to you.
Okay, well, probably most of you know who I am by now. My name is Robert Kroese, and I have, sorry, I should enunciate my name. Robert Kroese is how it's pronounced. Well, that's how I pronounce it anyway. I don't know how it's really supposed to be pronounced. It's Dutch, so it's like Kroese or something like that, but it's Kroese in American English. I have written 35 novels, and yeah, so I've been doing this for a while, and I actually just, I have kind of a weird history as far as relates to ebooks versus print books. Grew up, of course, wanting to be a writer and, love books, having books around me. When I wrote my first novel, ebooks and the Kindle was just starting to become a big thing. I was right on the edge of that, and so it was like perfect timing. I ended up self-publishing, and my book took off. My first novel, Mercury Falls, took off on Kindle, sold about 5,000 copies, and then I got picked up by Amazon Publishing that was trying to make a big splash at that point and push the Kindle platform more. Sold a lot more copies of that book, wrote a few more books. So I was a huge Amazon proponent and ebook proponent, and thought this was a wonderful, fantastic thing, and still kind of think it is for the most part. But lately, well, Amazon's turned fairly evil, and I have to admit, I mentioned this on Twitter. I literally had the idea for this panel while intoxicated. So I have these gummies. It's legal in Michigan, and I occasionally take these things, and for some reason I just had one of these thoughts that you have when you're a little bit under the influence. And I started thinking about Rachel's looking askance at me. But I had this sense of loss, of what it was like growing up to have books around you, and my parents were both English professors, loved books, had books all over the place, and I always had books and was carrying books everywhere, and to not have books as physical things in the space around us struck me as that we had just lost something as a culture. And I thought, people have ideas about this, and I'll kind of leave it at that. So I run this based science fiction and fantasy book club, which I'll talk a little bit more in a bit if we have time, as sort of a reaction to that. And so yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay, under the influence.
Yep. I'm not under the influence now of anything but caffeine, so
and sugar.
Clear. Well, a little sugar, yeah, some carbs.
I'm here to tell you about Marshall McLuhan, which I will. But since we're doing introductions, I'm older than all of you, and these guys right on the panel. I brought my props. Here's one book. Here's another book. This is my filing cabinet now, obviously, because when I was in graduate school, we didn't have ebooks, we had photocopies, and what you had was giant filing cabinets full of photocopies, which was your everybody's nodding, right? Your reproducible thing. It's interesting to me the sort of, I feel the loss of libraries, which I will talk about Marshall McLuhan when we get to this, but I'm realizing that hybridity is great because we have like I can carry around, in Good Reader now probably have 5 or 6 filing cabinets worth of photocopies in here, which I obviously find enormously useful for doing my research because you can search them, you can find things in them. Digital searches in books, or I'll have a paper copy of a book and the digital copy because you can search through digital copies. I don't see the either or, but I will have some things to say specifically about the physical loss, which I think is real and significant. But therefore, I'm not here as either a medievalist or a modernist, but as both. And it's a good thing to think about because we're deeply affected by the media that we're inhabiting.
My name is Morgan Newquist. I ran a publishing company for a long time. I've published some books, and I am probably also considered a hybrid person on this topic. She was mentioning filing cabinets, and it made me think about it. I did a research project this summer for history in the 1980s in Alabama, and the majority of my sources were newspapers. And because someone took the time to digitize newspapers, I could text search 20 years worth of newspapers to find the research I needed, and I could do it in 10 weeks. If I couldn't do that, I would had to sit down and look through every newspaper, daily newspaper for a 10-year period on microfilm. So that's not a Kindle, but that's a digitization thing, and it's really big. So yeah, I'll leave mine there and move on.
All right, I guess I'm last in line. I'm Luke Laupheimer. Unlike everyone else here, I do not have one of these little tags, and I don't have a bunch of props. So I guess relative to everybody else, I'm closest to naked. It's fine. I'll survive.
You didn't. Oh, I didn't make you a little.
No, you did. I just forgot to bring it down.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
this
So
is
it wasn't my fault.
He
I'm
said
the idiot
detect, he
here.
forgot his sign.
It's okay. I'll survive without it.
Okay.
And I guess I was brought on here because I decided to start a publishing company, but more importantly, to also start a printing outfit to print the stuff for that publishing company. I have a light printing press, and one of those guillotine paper cutters where you push the 2 buttons and it comes down and it chops it off. That's what you use to create a full bleed, where the image goes all the way to the very edge of the page. I have those 2 things in my garage, and I got them specifically so that I can tell all of the printers, go fuck yourself. and I've been working with an understanding that the media and really most institutions in general in this country have gradually become extremely hostile to not just normal people, but in addition to normal people, to just sane people. And on the issue of are ebooks, have we replaced physical books with ebooks? I'm going to go with a strong no. Physical books are not going away, but ebooks are going to be a thing. And is there, some kind of backlash against print books or ebooks or whatever? Not really. There is a backlash against DRM though, where companies try to tell you like, oh, you can't copy this file. Ooh, you didn't get permission from Amazon or whoever to look at this PDF. There is a backlash against that. So when I publish my little magazine that me and my friends write, we don't do DRM. So if somebody pirates my shit, I guess it's tough for me, but I'll cope, right? I'll cope. That's it. I guess that's my introduction.
But Rob, you were saying there was something almost metaphysical about the physical loss of books. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I hope so. It was really more of a feeling than a well thought out idea, but I guess it comes down to the fact that if we have these screens that we look at all day long, and it's a very isolating experience. And if you see somebody looking at their screen, they're doing something that doesn't involve you, and you don't get to ask about what's going on their screen. I mean, that's kind of, you don't go, hey, what are you doing there on your phone? Whereas if you're reading a book, and some people, I used to complain about this, people, you're reading a book, and people would be, oh, what are you reading? But now I feel kind of like I'm reading a book, and I'm like, I kind of miss that, like I'm not just screwing around on my phone or whatever. I'm reading a book, and I like to talk about books with people. And another example is, like I said, I grew up with books all around all the time. It's actually funny. My parents loved books so much that when we moved from Michigan to Florida, and we had just boxes and boxes of all these old books, classic, books, Charles Dickens and whatever. Um, and they brought all these books down to Florida. I don't know how many hundreds of, thousands probably of pounds of books. And then we had no place to put them. So we had this breezeway, which they have these things in Florida, where it's just kind of an open area, and it's covered, but it's not really protected from, say, humidity. So after about a year, all of these books were just completely, they were mildewed and kind of ruined. So they, without even really thinking about what they were doing and how they were going to do it, they were like, well, we obviously have to take all of these books. Like, why? And they weren't going to, they were retired. They were never going to get to read all these books. They just wanted to have these books around them. And the idea of having, again, we have all these electronics around us, but the electronics are just a medium, and maybe Rachel will talk a little bit more about that. And the medium becomes something in itself, and whereas books are, you can probably explain this better than I can, but the books are a particular thing. They're not just a medium. They have particular weight and content and meaning to them. And the idea that you have all these books around you in your environment, taking up space and kind of imposing on your world, makes you think, what are these books? What should I, this is interesting, like what is that? What does that title mean? And so they kind of call to you, they reach out to you, and you feel them as a physical presence, and you feel their meaning to the people who put the books there. Like people, like my parents, obviously that made an impression on me, even though they ruined all these books. I knew that there was a reason that they carried all these books, and it's like, well, they could have, now today they could have 10,000 books on their Kindle, and that wouldn't make nearly as much of an impression on me if that brought their Kindle, obviously to Florida. It wouldn't make any difference, and I wouldn't even know that had happened. So it's not a shared experience. There's nothing around me telling me, how important these books are. There's nothing calling to me. It's just, if you know about this book, you can get this book on your device and look at, through your blinders at this thing, and nobody else is involved, and there's no, you can share it on social media or whatever, but there's no real experience, no way of sharing the experience with people around you.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Thank you for the lovely setup.
Like,
Yeah, so Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message. They're all media. And those of us in the Dragon Common Room have been learning this in detail over the last several years. So you read Draco Chemicus and you'll find out. Rob is right. The books create a particular kind of environments, but so does the internet. And McLuhan's great insight was that one of his favorite sayings after the medium's message is, "Oh, the electric light is pure information." Everybody look up. Right, that you are living in whatever environment the artifacts that we create make. The electric light environment is one that we are all, well, to get the wires into the lights, to have the energy that's like, you're suddenly going to be terrified because you realize you're sitting inside the net. And then the contrast that you're describing between being in the library and being online, one of the things that I think about, and I was asking, how do you do your sound and stuff like that? Here we are, I'm looking at the camera now, in the internet, talking through the live stream that we have set up to do this. And there's loads of other people that are participating, potentially watching this, that we are now connected to. All of these media are media. They connect us with each other. The internet connects us in one way, the books connect us in another. And what McLuhan understood was the media themselves carry entailments of environment with them constantly. You're describing the books as if you're sitting in a forest, because you are. It's trees, right? And you're sitting in the environment of the wood and the ink and the labor of the people that created those physical things. We in this room, sitting in these electric lights and in the energy generation that it takes to be in a connected world, to have this microphone. McLuhan had a very interesting meditation on the effect of the microphone on the mass. If you put the microphone on the altar and you can hear the priest's voice, you can hear things that you couldn't otherwise. When I say I'm hybrid, I'm actually also hyper aware now, I hope, of the different kinds of spiritual effects that being in different media have. And if you feel that yourself in a library have a particular physical experience, you are feeling all of those trees. You're feeling all of the labor of the ink and the binding and the leather, and if you're a Box Day, the goats that that went into the books. That it's like all of it. Hans had a great thing that I saw this morning on a Cambridge bookseller who was looking at 2 books that were bound as gifts in 1912, 1913, and given by the bookbinder to his beloved, and then he died in the trenches. And the meditation was, this is physically connected with those people, the maker and the recipient of the gift, and I want these books. The thing is, the internet is just as real. The internet is a place where we connect with each other. It's just when the physical thing is not connecting with the digital thing, you feel the disjunct, I think, and you feel the sorrow of not being in that one environment. But we're all in this other environment too. I'm on a microphone being streamed into the world. What I hope is going to happen, and I'll try to stop right now, but what I hope is going to happen in our writing and our meditations and our communication with each other is to be aware of the spiritual effects of being in those different media environments. McLuhan got famous for his Gutenberg Galaxy, which was the effect of the thing that you're missing, which was printed books, on the world when we went from manuscript to printing. The British Library has all those manuscripts in its collection now, and they've digitized them. What's that, right? A digitized manuscript, so that I can read the manuscripts and but you know that if you're not in the presence of that book copied by human labor, hand ink on animal skin, you're missing something, right? And I think we're actually becoming more aware of these media effects, and it's the sorrow of the loss is also, but McLuhan would say the new technology retrieves something that's previously lost, but obsolesces other things,
Right.
and we're in that participation.
There's also an element of time that you lose, whereas like if you're looking at a scan of these ancient manuscripts, that's one thing that you get out of that is you see what the manuscript actually looked like.
Right.
I mean, you obviously don't get the full experience of it. Whereas if you read, the Iliad on your Kindle in modern typeface and electronic, digital form, I don't know. It just feels
Well, you're right.
completely wrong to read.
Yeah, it
to
feels
read it that way.
cheapened in a way, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, since we got into the spiritual stuff, I'm gonna throw in that I keep saying this to people. The internet is the main theater of war for the soul, at least in this century. It really is, and it's very easy to be dismissive of it because it's not a book, it's not a physical book. Actually, a lot of kids, a lot of youngsters don't even want ebooks. We're talking about ebooks versus physical books. A lot of people don't even want books at all, like ebooks or otherwise, PDFs, EPUB, whatever. They just want like a web page, an article on a website, or something. So we're all like, this debate in some sense is already obsolete. So there's there's that element to it as well. But the way that I view a lot of this and the way that I've been approaching it is, I actually just said this less than half an hour ago, is because the powers that be are so hell-bent on controlling and micromanaging everybody's thinking and what they're allowed to say, who they're allowed to associate with, you have to almost view it in terms of, who can I afford to piss off? Who can I piss off? How many people can I piss off before they physically come and put me in a straitjacket or in some gulag or whatever? And physical books have an immense utility in that front. Because once I print my little book or my little magazine or whatever, and I put it in the mailbox, and it gets shipped off to whichever continent it needs to arrive at. They could come to my house personally and shoot me right in the head. And whoever has that little magazine or that book, they have it. Okay, it is now in some way protected. It can't really be tracked in the way that an ebook can or a file can. If they turn the internet off, and yes, they can turn the internet off. If they do that, the books persist. So this idea that books, we're talking about books in a spiritual sense, but there's a very real utility in physical books that persists today. It's basically backward compatibility, the ultimate backward compatibility, at least as far as written media is concerned, and illustrations and images. In order to actually get rid of all of the books, that would be such an immense undertaking that even the most genius psychopath Tommy would never be able to pull it off.
Fahrenheit 451 would be a lot shorter if it was just some guy turning off the internet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a much simpler process than
Yeah,
rounding
exactly.
up every single physical book.
So
Yeah,
this
but Beowulf exists in one manuscript and it nearly burned.
okay.
So it's not just the physicality, it's printing, right? You're talking about printed books that are multiplied and replicated.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's another McLuhan watershed, right, between manuscript and printing, which is a good Alex thinks about.
Right. I mean, like we're not in the Middle Ages here where we're like we don't have to rely on some like underfed monk in some monastery.
fat.
Yeah, I've seen some of the illustrations. Don't worry, some of the paintings, but like we don't have to rely on some how about some underpaid monk in some monastery.
They were wealthy.
Some of them were. Some of them got well paid. Some of them didn't. But we don't have to sit there and rely on them to copy by hand any of these manuscripts. Okay, that's not the case anymore, and it's never going to be the case again. It's not. That's not happening.
Sure.
Mhm. Yeah, it's called the sneaker. Those kinds of archives are going to persist, even if they turn off the internet. Turning off the internet is not like a single switch. You'd have to go after most of the major ISPs. But if you were to get some of the major ISPs, the top 5, say, in America, you would effectively turn off the internet. So oh yeah. Well, that's why you gotta be willing to piss Amazon off by not using their service, which is what I did. Uh, I don't use I'm tempted to use Amazon. It's very tempting. I just even last night I read the scheme they have for that Kindle Unlimited thing. It looks so convenient. I could write some stupid novel and someone out there would actually think I'm like a talented writer. So enough people would think that I'd probably make some money doing that, and it would probably be more than I make now doing this. But it's like signing a deal with the devil, because these companies absolutely hate pretty much everybody here, right? And, just and like, I may get into a tiff with people occasionally here, but like, they hate both of us, me and whoever I get into a tiff with, just the same. We're in, as far as the powers that be are concerned, we are in the same boat. So they absolutely want to edit. They absolutely want to edit these documents, and they want to gaslight you into thinking that they didn't edit the documents. And that is why I say the big backlash isn't against digital media per se, it's against DRM. Because if Kindle can just revoke your access to a file, they control it. But if you have some PDF or some EPUB document that doesn't have any of that crap on it, they don't have much, right? They're going to now have to find some way to break into your computer. Like, it's going to be some 1980s cyber hackers movie nonsense for them to shut you up then. And I agree with you. There is a hallowed element to both that, the DRM-free files, and to the physical books, because there's something natural about it. And that it's something natural that isn't controlled by some bureaucrat in the government or a major corporation or whatever, that they can't mess with it. And that's immensely valuable. I agree with that.
Oh, well, what I was going to bring up is that there's a way around this, and this is a problem we ran into when we ran Silver Empire, and I'm going to lecture for a minute on this. We sold our ebooks direct without DRM, and even our biggest fans, Hans, we like to mess with him about it, still bought the books through Amazon because it was easy. So if this is something that concerns you, and I can say this without looking like I'm trying to get money, because Silver Empire doesn't exist anymore, buy direct from these indie publishers that are doing it. Take a little bit more time to learn how to load EPUBs or PDFs onto your Kindle. You can email them to like your Kindle email address and whatever, and support the people who are trying to disseminate information this way, trying to keep their books out of DRM instead of always defaulting to Amazon. And if we can do that in enough numbers, I mean, Amazon's like huge, but then you can ensure that some of these ebooks can remain out there in the wild and not be at risk for being recalled or changed or anything like that. So,
Can I try again? There's one manuscript of Beowulf. It burned in the Cotton Fire. There's only one manuscript of Beowulf because in 1066, the Normans invaded England. They took over the language, right? One of the interesting things, most of the time people here are talking about books we publish and you want us to read now and such, but the examples that Morgan and I gave about searching things were on historic documents, historic archives and study. When I'm thinking about the problem of the media, and what Rob is describing with the books that his parents had, it's not just the books we write and the books we sell, but the whole cultural environment that we are inhabiting. The interesting thing about the manuscripts, the often very wealthy monks, because people endowed their communities with them because they were institutions of stability, was if you had a manuscript, you hand copy it out, you throw away the original, which is also one of the features of the manuscript culture. You don't know whether anything's been changed. That's my job, right? So go back and look at the previous manuscripts, the older ones. When the printing press came out, you had the Index of Forbidden Books, because there's always this desire to figure out what's being, the new technology, what's going to be available, what's going to be politically dangerous, right? The Catholic Church has the Index of Forbidden Books. The censors were much more active in the Protestant countries. So, I'm hopeful in the long term because these are inventive problems that we keep creating by the transformations of communication media that we invent. So I don't think that I absolutely agree that the internet is the theater for the battle of the soul, but I think that that's always been the case. And If you all write stories about this so that we can think about it, and you know what happens with AI, what happens with books, what happens, then I mean, the Codex Babylon is a problem with the physical book that is transformed because of the way it's copied. So we are thinking about this. We are in a battle because we're alive, right? That the theater of the soul is our physical incarnation now in this life. So on guard, right? But if you're really interested in this question, I do encourage you to look at Marshall McLuhan's works, because he dealt with a lot of these problems of transformation in media through layers and layers of registers, not just the one that we're going through from printing to electronic, but from manuscript to printing, from oral to printing, from oral to manuscript, we don't know what was there before oral, because we only write it down in manuscript, right? So it's not a new problem, it's a problem with new
Right.
dimensions.
I mean, that's why I said this century. 'Cause who knows what comes next? I mean, specifically what comes next. And yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true. No one can make everything by themselves, but you can definitely go in that direction. You can definitely make something by yourself. I imagine most people with a paper mill don't have a printing press. So you just have to be willing to work with other people. Yeah, of course you have to be willing to work with other people. I never meant to insinuate that you shouldn't. That's why I raised the point of framing it in terms of how many people can I piss off? Because unfortunately for me, that number is not 8 or 9 billion or however many there are on this planet. Um, so yeah, no, I don't mean to suggest that like I am totally and completely independent and that I literally make everything that I ever need ever on my own. That would be a completely absurd statement. But I do think it's correct to go in the direction of picking out a few things that you need, that you use regularly, and making that, and then being willing to work with other people to make something else.
And other people, and I mean, I'm like the worst offender of this, but you can, and I'm trying to do better, but you can seek out people who are like-minded, and you can seek out people who are trying to do the same thing that you are doing. You know, I don't know that there's any individual who who runs his own paper mill, but I mean, there are companies out there that are run by families or privately owned companies that are not giant faceless evil corporations, and you can seek them out and work with them. And
Yeah.
usually, and actually, like, so here's an example. I had just to print these programs. I had used last year. I found a service online that did it, really cheaply and well. This year, for some reason, they wanted to charge me like an extra $500 because it was a rush order, even though I had contacted them like 2.5 weeks in advance. I ended up going with a local company, kind of almost by default. And they were fast, and they did a good job, and they were cheap, and I picked up the program from them, and they didn't say anything specifically about Basecon, but I know that they had read the thing because they found a typo that I had made, and so they and they were, without saying good job, keep going, or anything specifically about our con. It was pretty clear to me that they were happy to have this particular job. So I'm going to work with them again. So and you can. What I should have done is just sought out a company like that to begin with, rather than taking the easy way out as well. Okay, who can print programs cheap on the internet? Yeah.
Ah, yes. Bingo. Hmm. That's right. Hmm. Oh yeah. No, I mean, the thing is, it's not a question of if civilization will fall, but when. I agree with that. That being said, since it's an issue of when, we might actually see something that's a lot better than the internet come about well before civilization falls. We might outlive. Civilization might long outlive us. In fact, I hope it does because, I kind of enjoy it. I would much rather be a shut-in computer nerd who offends people on the internet and gets to more or less have off the reservation opinions than be some kind of caveman or something who has to collect berries and chuck spears at gazelle. I would much prefer that, but I am also a hunter, right? I have a gun and a hunting rifle, and I haven't shot deer in a long time, so a former hunter is probably more accurate. But I'm much more acutely familiar with what would go into surviving if civilization were to either fall completely or falter, maybe, which be somewhere in between. And I keep saying this to people, especially to people who over intellectualize this stuff, that in the end, you are going to have to know the difference between diesel and gasoline. You're going to have to know the difference between, you know, um, these different kinds of cartridges for firearms. You're going to have to really know this stuff because if civilization falters, and it probably will, um, your credentials will not save you. Your No one will care that you sold like 6 bajillion copies of whatever novel or whatever on Kindle when that's not going to amount to 2,000 calories. So I'm very acutely aware of that, and I do want to convey that to people. Yeah, the new canon. Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I, I want to throw in one last thing before I talk too much. Some 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 digital media will survive. No, it will, because not everything's really on the internet. A lot of it's little thumb drives on hard disks that you personally can control. A surprising amount of it will survive. No, the data persists on it. It's non-volatile media.
Okay, so my take on this is when civilization ends, the only person in this room thus far demonstrated to have anything to say to anybody is Fred, who sang a song he wrote and memorized. So it's the the only one here, and we're mortal, right? We'll die. But singing and storytelling as bards, Fred's shown us. Okay, look, guys, how many of you read Latin? My point.
Well, the right wing is going to have to go through its own long march through the institutions, if you know that um, term and phrase. We're going to have to go through our own long march through them. That's going to be very painful, by the way. Just so you know.
That's nicely phrased. And yes, so we do. My co-host on our live stream is here at the conference. She'll be on the panel tomorrow. That we write books, we publish physical books. We're trying to do poetry because hopefully it has the resonance of the songs that not Fred's, because that's way better than ours, but communication is media are communication, right? And I like that. That's why I like the way you phrased the question. It's like what are we trying to communicate? Books stabilize communication in one way. Manuscript stabilizes it in another way. Memory stabilizes it in yet another way. And I think, obviously as a teacher, I'm very concerned with the purpose of any of these, right? What is our purpose in communicating? From my perspective, I mean, it's evangelical, right? It's the good news of our life in this world, in our incarnate experience. And so with the books, it's interesting. Another, the reason we have books in this codex form is Christianity. Because the Christians liked that format, they used it. Books have the kind of aura, literally, that they do because of the way they were used liturgically in the early Middle Ages, and I'll show you some of those tomorrow in my talk. That's what I was trying to, in my comments, say. We use media for different reasons. The fundamental thing is they're media. They're of communication and they're of interpretation. So rather than worrying about who's going to silence us, people are always going to be trying to silence each other. Understand what it is that we're trying to communicate. And I'm grateful to BaseCon for giving us this context of this kind of communication. It's very important.
So we need to wrap things up here. Just to try to stay on time, like we never do. But so Jamie, if you have any final remarks, or we want to take any more quick questions? Just 1 minute.
I want to point something out for myself. In defense of ebooks, even physical books crumble over time. So they will not persist. People will have to read them or protect them manually or whatever. So that's just something to remember. And back here.
And I'm gonna cheat a little bit because I can. Yeah, I was hoping to have a spot in the panel to kind of stick in a plug-in for my own endeavor, but I'm just gonna do it now. So I have this. Most of you probably know I'm running this thing called the Based Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club, which is a little like the old science fiction book club where you get a book a month. And I'm trying to work with. I work with a lot of the authors that are here and other authors that we know online and other classic authors. And several of you are actually members. And there's a table over there with a bunch of the books. And I've got a deal going on now. What I'm trying to do is the club is basically right on the edge of being, I'm not going to say profitable, but of being kind of break even, where I can make it worth my time. I make basically zero money on it. But it feels like an important thing to do to me. It's kind of a reaction to a lot of what we were talking about, sending physical books out. both to encourage the proliferation of physical books and to help out a lot of the authors that are part of our community. So there's a table over there with with information and a bunch of books on it. So that's it for our panel. And in about 6 minutes, we're going to be try to start up again with technology and dystopia.
You guys can black pill Dan.
What?